Informational posts work very well. Very important in the post, always trying to make them as engaging as possible. And that's the key.
Hey, welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, the first global community connecting top-tier independent management consultants with one another. We just heard from today's guest, Ray Carbonell, the CEO at Qnary, a company that builds out and grows the reputation and thought leadership of professionals. Qnary writes LinkedIn posts and tweets for busy professionals, typically senior executives, and then also writes the replies to comments on those posts or tweets. In this episode, Ray shares how his firm works with their clients to identify the content pillars that the post will focus on, what makes a compelling post, and best practices engaging with those who comment on that post. Ray also shares the best times to post and how often to post. And that's 3 to 5 LinkedIn posts per week is optimal, and a minimum of 1 tweet per day is recommended. To learn more about his firm, visit Qnary.com, and that's spelled Qnary.com. Hello, Ray. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So, Ray, what I understand is that if we see some top executive posting on LinkedIn or even replying to, our comments on their post, it might not be actually that executive posting it. It might be your firm, Qnary. Tell us a little bit about what your firm does.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Will. And you're absolutely right. What Qnary does is we call ourselves an executive reputation growth management company. We work with executives, with professionals, with entrepreneurs, and we manage the day-to-day social media activity on their digital platforms. What we do on behalf of the executives is we build and optimize, rephrase their profiles, making sure that their messaging is right, they are able to tell their story the right way, and the profiles are optimized from an SEO perspective. We create short form content, meaning the blogs, LinkedIn posts, the visuals ourselves. We also create blogs, and we also manage interactions. If somebody comments on your LinkedIn post or on your tweet, we go ahead and we track that and we suggest a response. And the reality is, Will, is that executives, professionals, they are very busy doing, what they do best, whether it's to run businesses or, do financial modeling or do human resources. But they also understand that what they say in social media matters for a variety of reasons. And we've developed a process, a technology, and a content network that allows us to do it, on their behalf. And that's what we do.
Great. At what level are we typically talking about? Is this kind of a mid-level investment banker attorney? Is this only the CEO? Like, what kind of level people start engaging your services?
That's a great question. So we've identified a few different levels of professionals. Firstly, I would say Fortune 2000 senior executives. We usually start working with either SVPs or above. This is one group of executives that we work with. Also within large companies, we also work with business leaders of specific business units, right? Who would be more like brand ambassadors of the company or the face of that company, to a specific set of stakeholders. So we work with this type of executives within Fortune 2000 companies. We also work entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized businesses, where the CEO, the C-suite of the company, the owner, is as important, if not more, than the actual name of the company. And we also work with consultants as well, where they sell their knowledge, they sell their expertise on specific verticals, and you want to make sure that you are able to, develop relationships that often either start or get curated online. So we also work with professionals and and consultants that they sell their own expertise, and that's how they develop relationships.
Okay. I'm curious to hear about the part that you do on the profiles in terms of what that is. But let's jump first to the posting. So it sounds like there's three parts. There's kind of the profile, there's posting content, and there's also then the engagement part. I want to hear about all three. Let's just start with the posting. So how will you work with a client to probably upfront? You probably think through what's their content strategy and what topics they want to be posting on and how often and what platforms. Tell us a little bit about that process of how you figure out what's the whole content strategy for an executive.
Yeah, absolutely. So every time that we start working with an executive, with a professional, it all starts with what we call the content style session. It's an hour session in which we have this like one-on-one interview with the executive. The goal is to be able to identify, we usually say yes, up to three kind of like content pillars that we know that specific executive wants to be known for. If it's an executive in the marketing and advertising space, can be ad tech, transformational advertising, the future of marketing, right? AI, blockchain, etc. So we identify three pillars that are, that hit the core of what this executive expertise is and what the executive is basically doing on their day-to-day job, right? We want to make sure that with the content that is being created is intentionally produced in order to achieve expertise, knowledge in specific verticals. The idea of like jack of all trades, master of none. We want to make sure that we focus on three areas that are important for the executive. And based on that, we understand what their tone of voice is, what the publications that they usually read on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis are. And we also what are the other executives out there that they look up to as well, right? Based on that, we're able to create a very robust content strategy for each one of our executive clients. And then is when we start producing content on behalf of the executive, right? We have a network of social media content creators that are industry agnostic. And based on that content strategy, we start to create very, especially LinkedIn posts and tweets on a weekly basis. Our standard, kind of like the rule of thumb is we do 5 tweets per day. 5 tweets per week and 3 LinkedIn posts per week. We find that this is kind of like the very minimum that is required in order to leverage, the reward of, LinkedIn and Twitter's kind of like algorithm. And that's something that, it also allows us to be able to create enough of a consistency of content that will help our executives develop thought leadership in each one of the three pillars that we have identified for each one of them.
Who typically is kind of paying for this? I'm curious, is it, and on whose behalf? So is it often like the executive herself or himself, or doing it for their own visibility, or is it the company that they work for would be kind of paying for this because it's helping the company's brand?
So it's a mix of both. Will, I would say when we work with Fortune 2000 companies, it's often, I would say like 90% of the executives that are part of a Fortune 2000 company is the company that pays for it. And it's usually within kind of like an executive visibility, executive thought leadership program that they have developed. And Qnary is their partner. When we work with startups as well, in that case, it's always the company that pays for it. When we work with more like independent professionals and we work with consultants, it's usually the person who pays out of pocket as part of their business expense.
So when you're working with an executive at a Fortune 2000 company, it's not to sort of just build their profile as an independent person. It's more about in alignment with the company strategy. So it's part of a broader strategy by companies to get all of their executives to be more visible.
Yes, I would say that this is the case. But what we believe now, Will, is that there's no difference. Kind of like your personal brand and your professional brand, what you do personally and what you stand for professionally and what you do for the company is so closely aligned that we don't see, both spheres to be different, but for us it's the same. We know that by positioning an executive as an industry expert, we see that, like, if we do that in an authentic manner, we know that there's going to be a very positive halo effect from a reputation perspective to the company. And this is something that we've been able to prove. So we don't see that being a difference between what the company wants versus what the executive wants. We always find that there's very strong correlation, and that works very well to the advantage of the company.
Yeah. Now, a lot of posts on LinkedIn are really boring.
Yes.
You get stuff like, so humbled to be receiving this award, or, so excited about the launch of our new product line, or, it's so great to be here at this convention on the floor, or they'll, just posting, here's a link to a new HBR article.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that's just so bad. You talked about how you'll pick out some pillars, but within those content pillars, what do you find are the most effective type of posts? Mark Williams, who the kind of on LinkedIn formed, has a list of post types that he thinks work well, like informational posts, or this is useful posts, or debatable posts, like what do you think, yes or no? But you guys have probably studied this in a lot of depth. Give me a sense of the types of posts that you would be writing for the executives.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So most of the posts that we write, kind of like to what the article that you referred to from Mark Williams, are mainly informational posts. There are posts that are meant to add value to your audience, where the actual post already conveys kind of like a point of view. Our assumption is if you are a LinkedIn user, you're going to go on your phone and on the desktop, and then you're going to start scrolling down your feed, right? We want to make sure that post captures your imagination and makes you want to click on the article. So for us, it's less about the article, because we do find that, HBR articles, there are some articles, there are Forbes articles that are extremely valuable. But what is very important is to make sure that the actual capture of that post actually captivates the imagination of the audience and kind of like want them, you're trying to get them to interact with you. But we find that this is the key. Informational posts work very well, very important in the post, always trying to make them as engaging as possible. And that's the key. You want to make sure that you either tag people on your audience, either, if it's a Twitter account, or on LinkedIn, you tag, people from your network to make sure that they are already aware of the post and you spark interaction already, because that's going to help you generate more impressions, and that's going to start a side conversation that is very valuable for your audience. This is a type of post that works very well. If you're a leader of a company, one type of post that works also extremely well are posts where you celebrate your team and you celebrate the wins from your business unit or from your organization. Not only share that win, but doing in an authentic way, and always tag those who are either on your team that you're celebrating, or those on your team that were key leaders in order to achieve specific milestones. We find, and always do it in an authentic way. One thing that we will never do is write content where the executive does not feel comfortable sharing it, because it does not represent, or it doesn't sound like it comes from them. So it's kind of like a mix of informational and kind of like celebratory content, but also ensuring that it fits the voice of the executive.
Yeah. Just make up an example for me of a celebratory post that would, be engaging and that would get comments and so forth.
Yeah.
What would an example be?
Yeah. So for instance, so let's say on my case, for instance, so Qnary gets listed as Inc. 5,000 fastest growing company in the US. So I would create a post saying, hey, like, I'm proud or honored to, to be inducted in the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in the U.S. Thank you very much to the team that has made that happen. And then I would go ahead, I would tag every single one of my team members, either on the actual LinkedIn post or in the comment section, to make sure that everyone is rewarded and everyone is aware that I share this post. And then I would take a photo with my own phone. It needs to look handmade, not professionally done, so it looks more authentic. And then I would add that photo on the post. So I would do that, and that would ensure that not only my teammates, are aware that I share this post, so they would engage. It's also going to tap into every single person that I tag. So I would tap into their audience as well. So, let's say my president's LinkedIn connections will see that I tag her on the post. Therefore, they'll want to engage with me because I'm celebrating her. So all of a sudden, you start hacking the system in an authentic way. You're going to get a lot of interaction, a lot of impressions, and it's going to make you look good as a leader, but also will represent the company because you know that you're celebrating a victory.
All right. And what would maybe a couple examples be? Let's say that you are, one of your clients is, I don't know, maybe head of supply chain for a big consumer products company, like VP of supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So what would some examples of sort of more content related posts be, more like interesting industry news? And let's say one of their content pillars was around, I don't know, global supply chains or artificial intelligence enabled supply chains, if such a thing exists. Like what would an example post look like for that person?
Yeah, that's a good point. And so when looking at an executive like this, the first thing that we understand is who their audience would be, right? And we're talking to a very specific set of stakeholders who are executives within that vertical. So that we know the content in this case, it might not be, a very colorful, piece of content. It's going to be very much expert or niche into that in that space. So what I would say is probably we would find an article around a new technology that helps streamline kind of a global supply process, or we will look into a case study of a company in a different vertical that has improved the process and that has led to kind of like a much more efficient supply chain process and stuff like that. So the article, and I'm not an expert in the field, but the article would be very much informational, would highlight the benefit of that case study or of that technology, would bring you would add something that you're doing for your company. If it's a technology, to say, hey, and at BP, we're testing XYZ and we're seeing already early results, right? You also want to make it personal about you as well. And then we find that these type of articles with informational, but also you're adding part of your personal and professional experience in the post. We find that that's going to spark a lot of people wanting to share their own experience. And that's when you start a conversation very successfully.
What do you do to help grow their network? So part of it is reputation growth. So in addition to posting, are you also on LinkedIn, let's say, doing a lot of connection requests for the person? And if so, how do you do those and who would you invite?
So that's a great question. So yes, we do that. We do that at a small scale, meaning we don't go into an executive LinkedIn profile and start requesting 200 connections on every week or every month. It is very curated. And it also depends on the executive. So a C-suite of a Fortune 100 company, they do not want to do that because they've already have enough jobs trying to handle their 1,000 pending connections that they have any given day. But for more like traditional senior executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are using LinkedIn to expand their network and connect with potential customers, potential partners, what we find is, we agree with the client specific profiles based on LinkedIn filters, right? So we're looking for like senior executives on specific companies that have gone to specific universities, for instance. So we try to find executives that we know you're going to have, different, kind of level of connections, whether you are an alumni at New York University, right? Or that you guys have worked together at Accenture, etc. And then we create a very curated post. Say, hey, it looks like we went to X university together. We worked in this company. I would love to, find some time to get a coffee. And we find that this type of more personal introductions where you look at things that you have in common actually works very well. Another type of connections that we make is if you go to a conference and you get business cards, or you know somebody who attended in the conference that spoke and you really would like to be in touch, we also find these people and then we will connect with them, with the touch point being, hey, we both attended the conference, very interesting, let's grab coffee. I think we have things, that we can to talk about. So we always find touch points that are kind of like the gate to starting a conversation.
Being kind of running a firm like yours, can you tell when you look at a professional's profile if it's probably be managed by a firm like yours?
Not necessarily. Not really. If you look at a senior executive, there would most likely be somebody managing that profile, regardless if it's a firm like ours, an actual PR agency, or a communications team within that company. That I can tell from my own experience. I wouldn't necessarily say that you can see that, especially if you're able to do a good job and capture the voice of the executive the right way. It's hard to be able to tell. The only moment in which you should be you can see that is whether an executive starts from having a shell of a profile and barely being active to all of a sudden starting to be active on a weekly basis. And it's like, you've been on my LinkedIn profile, on my LinkedIn feed, consistently over the last 2 months. What happened here? That's kind of like awakening to social media. Sometimes it's a sign that somebody has hired a company like ours. But in terms of the quality of the content or the voice, that's something that not necessarily.
Okay. So most senior executives then, kind of SVP or above at a Fortune 500 company, we can assume that there's either the internal PR team or communications team or an external agency is probably involved in managing their posts.
Yes, I would say yes, not involved entirely, but they will have things to add.
What would you say is what would you consider as successful for a typical post in terms of the number of likes or the number of comments? If it's on LinkedIn, what would you say is pretty decent, and what are you shooting for? How much does that depend on the number of connections the person has? Curious to hear sort of what you think of as good, as a good outcome.
So that's a great question. So when we assess the success of our post, we usually look at engagement rate, meaning how many people have interacted with that post based on how many impressions you have generated. Usually the lowest the impressions and the lowest the connections, the higher the engagement rate, just because, one like over, 50 impressions is much, or one interaction over 50 impressions is, that percentage would be significantly higher than, over 100,000 impressions. But what we often find is we usually try to keep that engagement rate to be at least 1.5% to 2% across the board. We find that this is the benchmark that we've seen out there be kind of like best practices, and we always try to beat that for each one of our executives.
So if you're getting if you get 1,000 views of your post, a good would be 15 to 20 likes or comments.
Exactly.
Okay.
On LinkedIn, and then on Twitter, when you measure that in the level of interaction, the only caveat is when Twitter provides their own data, they usually include number of clicks on the post. Usually impressions on Twitter is significantly higher just because it's a much more open platform and you can leverage specific keywords and hashtags to tap into somebody, a broader audience. But the only caveat between Twitter and LinkedIn is Twitter also includes how many clicks the tweet has received or how many clicks the article has received versus LinkedIn is what you see from an interaction perspective, meaning comments, shares, and likes is, the interactions that are being measured for each one of the posts.
Have you worked out what's the best time of day to post in order to maximize the chance of getting interaction?
Yes, and the answer is it depends on your audience. It really depends on your audience. We analyze your audience and we analyze what are the times in which your audience is more active, and then we try to post for each one of our executives accordingly. So, but it really depends.
So let's say, so give me some examples of different types of audiences and when might be the best times for them.
Yeah, so we often find that if you are like a U.S. executive and your audience is very much U.S. focused, we find that at times where your audience is more active, and there's also common sense is commuting times, either before work, before like 8:30 or 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. are usually the times where your audiences are going to be more active. Because you can catch them, especially at night and in the evening, where you can generate a lot of engagement. Also, we find that Thursdays and Fridays are two really good days to boost that engagement as well, compared to Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. This is one. For instance, in my case, I'm from Barcelona, so I often find that if I share something at around like 9, 10 p.m., I can capture audience that are here in New York, Chicago, in the West Coast still. But then when I wake up in the morning, that's when I've been able to get kind of like my European connections, people that I went to business school with. That's when they wake up. And then usually when I wake up in the morning, that's when I see a big bulk of my engagement coming from. And then when I do that, then what happens is, because that's when the interaction happens, then through LinkedIn algorithm makes my post be more relevant. So then when those connections who are in New York wake up, that post is still going to be relevant, and then I'll be able to capitalize on that engagement, and then I'll get people from New York to engage as well.
Do you find that posting too much, is there a too often that you can post where the LinkedIn algorithm starts working against you and says enough from you?
So we don't like to post more than once a day on LinkedIn. Not only because of the LinkedIn algorithm, but also you don't want to overwhelm your audience. On Twitter, there's just so much content. There's so many people that you can follow that like once a day is the bare minimum in order to be relevant. On LinkedIn, it can get overwhelming. So we say 3 times that's enough to make the most out of the platform without overwhelming your audience. But yes, we would say you need to be careful not to overpost and dominate and overcrowd somebody's LinkedIn feed.
Okay, so I'm hearing on LinkedIn, a minimum of 3 times a week, maximum of 5 times a week or once a day is about the right place to be. And on Twitter, it's at least 5 times a week, and more is fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk a little about the engagement piece. So, and how it sounds like on the posts, you get the executives to sign off and approve them. Talk to us about how you work on the engagement side. When someone comments on a post, how do you kind of figure out how to respond? I imagine that those aren't all pre-approved by your clients. So do you kind of get some general types of replies that are approved? Just talk to us about the engagement piece.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we track engagement, meaning people that have commented on your post, people that have shared your post or have mentioned you on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And then there are specific comments that we know based on conversations with executives that just grant a thank you and we tag the person, or it grants just clicking like and putting a thumbs up emoji, etc. There are specific responses that we have already pre-agreed with our client that we're going to respond with kind of like standard, kind of like very plain answers, right? There are some others, especially when, they're being challenged with a question or with more of like a personal comment that only our executive client will know. Then what we do is we create a suggested response. We send that to the client, and the client will approve, will edit, will send us feedback. And then once the client kind of like gives us the thumbs up and approve the response, we're going to go ahead and, post that on their behalf.
Yeah. Now, one strategy that I've heard is in order, this whole kind of sales using LinkedIn as social selling and so forth, is to start trying to engage in a conversation with your kind of target, person that you're trying to sell to, of starting to comment on their posts and like their posts and so forth. It turns out that you're actually engaging with a reputation firm who's managing it for that person. If you're engaging with someone who's kind of senior enough, it might actually be invisible to that person. You might be wasting your time, which had never really occurred to me. Do the executives still, even though you're managing it, are they still kind of checking LinkedIn and seeing the activity, or checking Twitter and seeing what's being said on their behalf, or do they just kind of just completely ignore it?
Absolutely. No, they do check it themselves. Often, when we usually start engagements with specific executives, even the ones that initially they don't want anything to do with social media, as they start to get interactions and they see that profile, come to life, they start to feel like, let me check it myself. Sometimes you'll start to see a LinkedIn post that we never wrote, and that's because the executive felt like sharing something, him or herself. So, to these companies or these individuals doing social selling, what I'd say is executives are aware of what's happening on social media, either because they see it themselves, or because we share that with them. Think that even if an executive receives a comment that says, "Thanks so much for sharing this, Will," right? And we say, "Thank you," at Sarah, right? We would still report that comment has been, made on their profile. We just have the ability to share the response on their behalf to make that process much more agile.
Interesting. All right. Any tips that you have on the profile piece? You talked about optimizing the profile for search engine optimization. What are some of the maybe mistakes that you see people making on their profile, and what do you say would be a best practice profile?
Yes. So a few tips that I find very useful that make a world of a difference. First of all, the visuals. Visuals matter. Not only your profile photo, make sure that the profile photo is optimized, is professionally done. Very important. That's the first thing somebody, that anybody would see on the profile. Never have kind of like your profile without, a profile photo. And also, the second one would be the cover photo. LinkedIn has its own template, kind of like blue background with some connecting dots. Try to create your own cover photo. For executives who have, been interviewed by the media or they've spoken in panels, I would always say, and what we do for them is we create a collage of three or four photos of them being interviewed or speaking at panels. What we find is that when somebody lands on a profile and they see this type of cover photos, that automatically establishes thought leadership. Otherwise, what we recommend for executives is to create a design, cover photo with the name of your company. So it automatically links your presence, your thought leadership with the business that you work with. And that works very, very well. This is the first thing. Second, I would say your LinkedIn headlines. Sometimes LinkedIn headlines are important because they, obviously they establish your level of seniority, what you do, CEO at XYZ, director of operations, blockchain, lead at, that company. This is number one. That's a very tactical profile, establishes seniority and starts to categorize you in specific verticals, right? But the reality is that headline allows you for more character. So try to find specific keywords that you think are going to help you do two things. One is expand kind of like who you are from a background perspective, but also create additional keywords that will help you be more findable on LinkedIn searches, right? So that's something that is very important. So just be mindful of the additional characters that you get on LinkedIn headlines in order to expand beyond title and company name. This is very important. And the last piece that I would say on the content side is your summary. You know, a lot of what I find is a lot of executives either don't have summary or the summary is a list of like bullet points with achievement. What we recommend is just because attention spans are so short, try to make a short bio that tells in a very easy to read manner your professional story, and then accompany that with articles about projects that you've been involved in the past, etc. What we find is by adding third-party independent articles to your summary, it just gets you that much more credibility. Somebody else telling your own story. So this is from kind of like an optimization and a content. The other two things that I always recommend, one is from an SEO perspective. LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to customize your URL. You know, usually if you don't do that, you will find your name, surname, and then a random series of like letters and numbers. So, and you have the ability to create your own LinkedIn URL. So do that. That helps you from an SEO perspective. And finally, be aware of your privacy settings. Very important. You know, who can see your information, you know, who can see your content, you know, what is being displayed publicly versus privately, etc. Just be aware of that, because we want to make sure that you're not too private where people cannot find you or they cannot openly want to connect with you, but at the same time, just be mindful in case you want to make sure that you keep some of your stuff private.
Tell me a little bit about the results that you achieve for your clients in terms of the growth of their reputation and how you measure that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we look at results both on a qualitative and quantitative perspective, right? So we look at audience growth across platforms, and we don't only look at kind of like the absolute kind of like number growth and how many more connections you've been able to achieve, either through us or organically, people wanting to connect with you. But we also look at the breakdown of your audience. Who has connected with you, right? Are they aligned with the type of people that you want to be connected with? Are your new connections within the industries that you want to be, you know, closely connected with as well? So it's always a mix of qualitative versus quantitative analysis. So we look at audience growth. We also look at the impressions, not only per article, but in aggregate. Impressions for us is a sign of awareness. Are you generating more awareness? Are people, you know, reading your post? Meaning, are they connecting you with the specific pillars or topics that we had initially identified for yourself? But also, are they engaging with you? So we look a lot at the engagement rate, and we want to make sure that there is an alignment between audience, impressions, and interactions. And we find that the combinations of the three of them, you know, works and means that we're actually building a very robust profile that generates activity, and those who are part of your network are actually interested in what you have to say on an ongoing basis. And this is the kind of like the basic KPIs that we track and then measure success. Outside of that, you know, companies hire us for a variety of reasons, not only for to build specific set of thought leadership, but also business development, employee engagement, you know, kind of like hiring, recruitment, retention. So based on specific business cases, you know, then we track specific KPIs as well.
So having a more visible executive might help the company hire employees or retain employees.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, and can you just give us a sense, not necessarily your firm, but kind of just in the industry broadly, if someone wants to engage a firm to manage your profile, to do kind of what you do, what's the, maybe for a consultant or an independent consultant who really wants to outsource that and have a firm, do to 3 to 5 posts a week, what's the approximate cost of that service?
Yeah, so our kind of like cost structure is pretty straightforward. Is a monthly retainer and the monthly fee is $950 per month, and that includes the 5 tweets, 3 LinkedIn posts, like building, refreshing, optimizing your profiles. We also grow your audiences across platforms. We do 2 blogs a year. We do monthly about quote cards, thought leadership cards, and then we also do engagement and social media monitoring.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's helpful as a benchmark. Well, Ray, thank you so much for joining. This is really cool. Where can folks go to learn more about your firm? You want to give a website?
Yes, so Qnary.com, Qnary, or you can always find me via email at ray@qnary.com.
Fantastic. Ray, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Will. It was great to be in your podcast and to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.